This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, good morning. Welcome to daily editorial enrichment program of LAX R&D. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 26th June 2019. This is 1500th video on Law Excellence channel today. So the first article for discussion, the future of parliamentary democracy. So this article we can fit into the features of Indian Constitution. So the parliamentary democracy is part of the basic structure of Indian Constitution. We will try to understand this. So what are the basic features of a parliamentary democracy? Political parties, they contest the elections. The party which gets the highest number of seats in the legislature forms the government. In this context, political parties are the instruments through which parliamentary democracy is served. And the second thing is, in a parliamentary democracy, the government is collectively responsible to the parliament. So that is the critical feature of the parliamentary democracy. So in this context, a system which is counter to this, that is called presidential system. In a presidential system, there is no collective responsibility, and the concentration of authority exists in the hands of the president of that country. So presidential systems across the world more or less transformed into authoritarian systems as there is concentration of power. But parliamentary systems are more accountable as the authority is dissipated across the system. So it has a collective responsibility and a greater accountability. So that's why India has preferred the parliamentary system over the presidential system. So in this context, let us have a brief understanding of Indian politics. Indian politics started going through a kind of disturbance or change from 1990s onwards. This has started during the Rajiv Gandhi era, but the fierce nature of these politics was seen in 1990s. These politics are stated as Mandal and Mandir politics. The Mandal politics talks about reservations, and Mandir politics talks about the growth of religion in Indian politics, the Ram Mandir. So when VP Singh was the Prime Minister, he has brought in out this Mandal Commission report, which has suggested the reservations for OBCs in government jobs. And at the same time, Mr. L.K. Advani started Radhayatra for building the Ram temple in Ayodhya. This phase of Indian politics is called Mandal and Mandir politics. The Mandal politics are seen as a consideration for social justice in India, and Mandir politics seen as a rise of communal division in India. So later political parties, if you talk about Samajwadi Party, RJD, all these have taken up this Mandal politics forward, and BJP has taken the Mandir politics forward. Now later, after 2000, when globalization era has taken its full entry into India, the priorities of the people and the narrative which the people started buying is also changing. The globalization, along with that, it has opened Indians and Indian economy for Western world. So it means people have become conscious about development, and globalization has offered that development is possible in an integrated world. And this globalization is also facilitated by communication revolution. So today, the political parties are able to win the elections through a data driven communication which is dependent on social media. So the social media is started defining new India. Between 2014 and 2019, in 2014, development was more spoken, but in 2019, issues of development like unemployment, poverty, all these have become non-issues. So in this context, we can make certain observations in 2019. Irrespective of the developmental issues, the vote share of the BJP has gone up. The narrative was more on nationalism, pride of India, and making India a superpower. So this ultra-national narrative was bought by the all sections of the people. So normally BJP is seen as upper caste Hindu party, But however, in 2019 elections, BJP has increased its vote share among Dalits tribals. Though its vote share among the OBCs has come down, it has significantly increased among Adivasis and Dalits. And the second is the biggest vote bank of the BJP is the first time voters, the young population of India. So, keeping this aside, it means what is the point we are taking home? India has moved from Mandal Mandir politics, politics of social justice and secularism, to politics of nationalism. And further to this, the nature of parliamentary democracy and its functioning has undergone a significant change. In a parliamentary democracy, political parties are central and the votes are being asked in the name of the political parties. But today the elections are being held in the name of the leaders of a political party. If you talk, 2014 and 19 elections were held in the name of Narendra Modi versus Rahul Gandhi. So obviously, when personalities dominate the party, the fight becomes more presidential style rather than parliamentary style. So in this context, we have to understand Indian parliamentary democracy is more functioning like a presidential system as one person is becoming to the helm of the affairs. Even if you take the states, the chief minister has become more important than the collective responsibility of the cabinet. This kind of the system we describe as prime ministerial government. A presidential style of functioning in a parliamentary democracy is often criticized as prime ministerial government. In India, Indira Gandhi's government was criticized to be a prime ministerial government. What is the basic feature of this prime ministerial government? The collective responsibility is weakened. When collective responsibility is weakened, then obviously it is a manifestation of concentration of authority. That is the point we need to carry home. Next article, revisiting the emergency. By the way, today is 26th June. So on 26th June 1975, national emergency was imposed by Indira Gandhi government, which is seen as dark days of our democracy. Where can we bring in this article? So post independent India, important political developments, we can add this article over there. It also can be added in Indian polity, especially with regard to federal relations and emergency provisions. Now, revisiting the emergency. So, let's understand under Article 352, the President of India can impose the national emergency in the name of or on the grounds of war, external aggression, or internal disturbance. Later, this internal disturbance word was changed to armed rebellion. It means today, President of India can impose the national emergency on the grounds of armed rebellion. This is also called as internal emergency. Before 44th Amendment Act, the word which was existing was internal disturbance. At that point of time, there were no checks. That is, today after the 44th Amendment Act, an approval of the cabinet, a written approval of the cabinet is necessary and it has to be communicated to the president to impose the national emergency. No such a safeguard existing then. And within 1 month, the emergency has to be approved by the parliament with special majority. It can also be repealed by the Lok Sabha with a simple majority. Like this, many safeguards are being brought now. This is the constitutional dimension of it. But how the institutions failed when national emergency was imposed, let us understand this. Who has to protect the rights of the citizens? Judiciary has to protect the rights of the citizens. But when people filed for habeas corpus in high courts and Supreme Court, the judiciary did not stand to the power on the day. The only judge who has given the dissent note, he was Hansraj Khanna. And this Hansraj Khanna has to pay his position as Chief Justice of India. He was supposed to be promoted as Chief Justice of India, but Indira Gandhi government bypassed him and promoted his junior Mr. Beg as the Chief Justice. Then he has resigned. It means Judiciary, which is supposed to be independent, has become a puppet, and judiciary, which is supposed to bend, has crawled before the executive when the rights are supposed to be protected. And the next is the cult politics, charismatic politics have reached to its zenith. The psychophancy, and especially in this context, the Indira Gandhi has made it, was made as a leader in such a way that India is Indira, Indira is India. Especially after the Bangladesh war, with victories India has got, Indira Gandhi's cult image has raised to its peaks. And the next is when Indira Gandhi's election was declared as invalid, she was on the verge of unbecoming the prime minister. Then she imposed the national emergency. So, in this context, whenever the elections were held in the name of individual and people gives a huge majority to that individual, then concentration of authority, psychophancy, cult politics, all are expected to happen. So now author what she says is the similar kind of environment is getting created in India, and we need to be careful about that. So here for our class, parameters to judge healthy democracy, that's what it is given. So free and fair elections. And the second is to what extent opposition is strong and is able to question the government, that is existence of a spirited opposition. And the third thing is the collective responsibility in the case of parliamentary democracy. All these are the tests of a healthy democracy in a given country. So in this context, are we compromising on these things in present days? This is the question we have to think. The opposition is decimated, and the next is the collective responsibility is being replaced by a prime ministerial form of government. The elections are free and fair, but money power is increased like never before, and added to that, the communal rhetoric has increased in the elections. So, when we test these parameters, obviously the answers are not very convincing to us. The next is why government wants to bank DNA. So this is about the DNA regulation bill which the government is trying to bring in. So this DNA regulation bill is a question of the privacy of an individual. In that context, this can be a part of fundamental rights. So DNA regulation bill can also be a part of science and technology with regard to DNA testing, etc. Let us try to understand this. Now, in United States of America, whenever a crime has happened, immediately police go over there and collect the DNA samples at the place of crime, and they try to match these samples with the database, and it makes finding the culprits very easy, criminals is very easy. So Indian government also want to bring in the same thing. But what is the challenge over here? Let me put it this way. If government is storing all my database, all my DNA, it can know what diseases I am prone to, and then what is my psychological and biological characteristics. It is too much an intrusive information. Obviously, that intrusive information is going to damage my privacy. So, a balance has to come between the need for society to maintain order versus in privacy of an individual. So, in this context, what this bill talks about, it tries to introduce DNA regulatory board and then DNA data bank. This regulatory board has to make all the rules for collection of samples, testing of samples, and storage. So DNA data bank is the place where all the repository of the samples will be placed. All our DNA information is placed. So in this context, let us see the procedures. So first, the samples will be collected, and while collecting the samples, there will be a written consent of the accused, or if he is not giving a written consent, the matter has to be presented to the magistrate and his authorization has to be taken. This is for criminal cases. And let's take missed people are there, or parenting issues are there. In all these cases, a written consent from whom a sample is to be collected has to be taken. And then an laboratory has to test this. and this laboratory need to be accredited by the regulatory board. And the information which the laboratory gives, it will be stored in DNA data bank into 5 categories. The first category is crime scene index. So this crime scene index will be permanently stored. Other is under trial index, offenders index, missing persons index, unknown deceased persons index. So this index can be removed on the request of the individuals. So these are the provisions. Here the big fight will be between the privacy of the individual versus need for better investigation, need for better criminal justice system. Between these two, there is a contestation. And the next article, an indecent settlement. So don't get much into this article. Just try to understand the era of globalization. The multinational companies have spread across the countries. So these have to treat every customer and a consumer alike. But however, they have differential ad sticks, differential treatments for people belonging to different countries. In this case, let us take Johnson and Johnson company. This company has made some hip replacement tools. So these implants, these have got certain defects. They are getting eroded, and finally they are releasing certain dangerous metal like chromium, cobalt, cadmium, etc. into the blood. So these are being recalled across the countries. The company spent close to 4 billion in United States and other Western countries, but in India, it is arguing to pay 20 lakh rupees for every person where it was installed. It is hardly few crores of rupees, but the company is not willing to pay the same, and it is taking a legal recourse. Now, second is to protect the consumers from MNCs. The effective grievance redressal system is still not available in case of India. Only the way they can get the redressal is through the consumer courts. So that's why consumer protection in India is not well protected, and MNCs are making the best use of it, and there is no equal treatment of the consumers across the countries. That is the point which I want to drive you home. And the next is the state of Indian prisons. So, how a country maintains prisons, it reflects its respect for human rights. So, if prisoners are seen as slaves, then the country is called North Korea. In North Korea, people are prisoners. These are not being given food, and there is a gross human rights violations. So that's why Gandhiji says that the inmates are not slaves. The inmates of a prison are here to reform, and these need to be treated as more the children to be nurtured. So, in this context, National Crime Records Bureau has released certain data, and it brings in certain glaring facts about Indian prisons. So, this we can add it up to human rights issues in India. These human rights issues we can add to the non-constitutional bodies or quasi-judicial bodies, that is National Human Rights Commission, etc. So let us see National Crime Records Bureau's report. So most of the people who are there in our prisons, these are under trials. Who are under trials? A person who is accused of a crime and who is under investigation, who is remanded, he is called an under trial. An under trial is just an accused, he is not convicted. So most of our prisoners in the jails are under trials, and many of these people stay in jails for years together because they do not or cannot afford a bail, a surety for the bail. So in this context, there is something called 436A of Criminal Procedure Code. What it says is, if a person is in under trial for half of his sentence time, if he gets convicted, then he can be released from the prison on bail. Remember again, let's take a case has a maximum sentence of 7 years. If he is served in the prison for 3.5 years as an under trial, yes, he has to be released on bail. That's what the 436A of Criminal Procedure Code is saying. But most of our jail authorities do not have the knowledge of this. And the second is, many of the people who are arrested for preventive detention, to prevent a crime from happening, these prisoners are increasing in jails. These are also a kind of under trials. And the second is, there is a socialistic understanding. Most of the people who are prisoners are coming from marginalized communities. It means that they are disproportionately high. So that shows unequal nature of the Indian society. And people who are deprived for their subsistence when they are getting involved in a crime, then obviously they are facing the music of law. And the second is the prison officials do not have the knowledge of 436A of CRPC. Along with that, independent monitoring of the prisons by the judicial authorities is very much important to maintain humane conditions over there. This is what is called third party audit. But there are no statistics how many times the jails are being inspected by the judicial authorities. And there is an increase in unnatural deaths in the prisons. And added to that, the mental health of the prisoners gets deteriorated over a period of time. So the psychiatric counseling is very much important, but the psychiatric support or help is inadequate. And then many of the under trials they stay in the prison because they cannot afford a bail or surety for the bail. So these are the things which this article is speaking about. And the savings dilemma, this is the most important article which I like today. So in this case, in our economy we have a topic that is called mobilization of resources. So in this article, so what we say, gross savings are essential for capital formation. So our savings which we make, so these come from households, public, government and private sources. Private sources are nothing but corporate savings. So these will be given as loans and they convert into capital formation. So this capital will be converted into investment and this investment will lead to growth. So savings are essential for economic growth. So when there is a gap between the savings and the investments, that gap has to be filled by foreign investments, mobilizing the foreign sources. So in this context, in India, the savings are coming down and then the needs of the investment are increasing to ensure the growth. So it means savings investment gap is increasing. So that's why we are more and more depending on the foreign sources. When dependence on foreign sources increases, the stress on the current account balance of payments is bound to increase. So in that scenario, what we can say, whenever young population is there, young population is more consumptive. So when consumption is increasing, it is creating demand. So when demand is increasing, when there is no investment, obviously there is supply demand gap. So investment is necessary to increase supply. But as consumption is increasing, demand is increasing. As there are no savings, no supply. When this gap has increased, obviously it leads to price rise, which we call it as inflation. So in this scenario, the way forward for India is increasing savings. Government has to incentivize the savings by the households. The oil of Indian economy was household savings. Now, in the Western countries today, majorly the savings come from corporate sector. So two-thirds of the global investments today, they come from the corporate savings. So in the development phase, India is also expected to increase corporate savings, but in the existing scenario, incentivization of the savings is essential. If not, it can lead to inflation and also it can lead to something called as a crisis in balance of payments. The next, a city gone dry. This is about Chennai water woes. So obviously this is related to conservation. What could we have done in Chennai? One is water planning is very much important. So water planning, it is a balance between conservation of the water and then usage of the water. So encourage conservation. So in this context, protection of wetlands, water reservoirs, and saving the rainwater, all these comes from conservation. On the other hand, usage, reuse and recycle, this culture has to increase. So a water planning is essential for protection of cities in the long term. In this context, the water crisis has a severe economic impact in a particular city. Today, Mr. DiCaprio also has commented about the water crisis in Chennai. So entire world has seen the water crisis. Obviously, investors think twice before going into such a city, and it means that the water shortage shall not be seen as a business as usual approach. Immediate action is necessary. And next is the tension. This article is about the tension between RBI and the government of India. So this obviously leads to the banking sector and related issues in economy. So what are the tensions? Mr. Viral Acharya, he has resigned to RBI before the end of his tenure. So Raghuram Rajan gone, Urjit Patel gone, now Viral Acharya has gone. Added to that, two economists, Arvind Pangadia and then Arvind Subramanian. Next is all these people who have come from the West to serve India are resigning from their positions. So, what is the message it is sending to world about Indian economy? You know, Arvind Subramanian has spoken about the credibility of the Indian growth statistics. So, credibility of Indian economy and credibility of the Indian system to respect the specialists have to be maintained. Manmohan Singh, Sam Pitruda, all these people were able to sustain Indian system for the respect to their knowledge. So Indian system is under crisis. So here, what are the issues between RBI and government? So RBI during Raghuram Rajan time, it has taken some tests which are called as stress tests. So this is to test the economy and soundness of the functioning of the banking in banks in India. And they also have taken a framework which is called prompt corrective framework. This has led to the higher NPAs of the banks. So RBI want autonomy to correct the banking sector, but government is worried that if banking sector collapses, economy will collapse. And the second is RBI's balance sheet was positive. It has many excess funds in its balance sheet. The government wanted these excess funds to be transferred to it so that it can spend, which RBI has opposed. And the next is monetary policy easing. So the government wants to have growth. That's why more capital shall be available. So for that purpose, they want the monetary policy stance to be supportive. In this context, the monetary policy easing can lead to inflation, which is the worry of the central bank. And the next is IL and FS. It is under crisis. So this is a non-banking finance company. Now the government want RBI to come in as a lender of the last resort, which RBI is not inclined to. So these are the four issues on which government and RBI have the great differences. And the next is lynching redux. So you know the lynching of Dalits and minorities based on various communal factors is increasing in India. What are the factors how to handle this? This is also an issue to be quoted on growing intolerance in India and protection of the vulnerable sections in India with regard to social justice topics. So in this case, the hate messages on social media which are getting viral and communal rhetoric and added to that cow vigilantism which has started in the last government is continuing now. So lack of immediate response from the government and government's failure to send a stern message that it will not accept any such a behavior has led for this. And again, Indian legal system can punish an individual, but there are no laws to punish a mob. So in this case, we can bring in a special law to punish for the mob activity. And the second, judiciary has suggested for a nodal officer in every district to look into this mob lynchings. So, but however, developing intercommunal harmony, tolerance, and setting an example from every leader in this country on principles this country believed in is essential to avoid this mob behavior or mob violence in this country. And the next is nature versus nuptials. Again, it is conservation. So, in Auli, Gupta family conducted a big fat wedding and it has damaged the entire pristine ecosystem in Himalayas. In this context, Rawat, the chief minister of the state, stated that this marriage is going to attract tourism to the state. So, in the name of the tourism, we cannot destroy the ecosystem and environment. So, that's why the word which we have to remember is called responsible tourism in the place of mindless consumerism. So, the political will is necessary for responsible tourism. So, the mindless consumerism has to be replaced by responsible tourism. My take home point is this. And the next, the loss is not just Istanbul. So this is more related to international affairs. Because whenever an article comes on Erdogan, I am very much interested because many of the international newspapers compared Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Modi together as most powerful leaders. In this context, Erdogan has lost elections, mayor elections in Istanbul, Ankara, which are the two largest cities there. What is the reason? One is economic crisis. So in India also we have economic crisis which is going on. And the second is it is involved unnecessarily in Syrian war. It has created a refugee crisis. And the second, there is hyper nationalism which is promoted. And then Kurds are seen as the enemies of the state by the Mr. Erdogan's government. So on the Syrian Kurds also they have attacked. In this context, there is disenchantment with Kurds. These are the minorities in Turkey. So the wrong treatment of the minorities. And then Fethullah Gulen, this is a community of social workers. After military riot in our military, which tried to overthrow the Erdogan government in a coup, the Gulen was stated to be the culprit, and he is taking an action on all the philanthropic activities of Mr. Gulen, who is involved with education, etc., which did not go well with the citizens out there. And internationally, Turkey is part of NATO, and it has good trade relations with United States of America and Europe. But today Turkey wants to import S-400 missile system from Russia, and United States of America wants to impose sanctions under CASA Act. This CASA Act stands for Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. So obviously this is going to worsen the economy further. So these are the reasons why Mr. Erdogan is losing the ground quickly in case of Turkey. So India is also going through economic crisis. There is hyper national rhetoric and insecurity for minorities. And added to that, there is a fight against civil society. And then India is also trying to buy the S-400 missiles from Russia. So that's why I normally try to make comparison between these two countries. And the next, coming to Mint, the art of diplomacy as a big picture game. So this is about India-US relations. You know that India and US are coming close together geostrategically, but economically they have the differences. It means that India USA are merging on geostrategic interests and diverging on economic interests. That's why this article suggests there has to be a give and take approach. India, as already having a strong market economy, it can bring in tariffs to a lower level. It can import the Harley Davidson wines and apples from United States of America. And in the India's best interest, as it is turning into a knowledge economy, it can create strong IPR regime which can support its economy in long run. On the other hand, America, it can protect the India's interests abroad. For example, America wants to impose sanctions against Iran, but Indian assets are there in Iran. Example, Chabahar port. So that needs to be protected. And second, India Russia have strong military relationship and there is consistency of supplies from Russia. So in this context, India and Russia made an agreement for S-400 Triumph missiles. So USA says that any such missiles are imported, it can impose the sanctions as per the CARSA Act, that is Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. So India can be exempted from that. In that way, give and take relation can help both of them. And other issues on the trade front, one is data localization and the e-commerce policy of Government of India also have certain problems to the United States of America. And added to that, visa issue, immigration issue, and then removing India from generalized system of preferences. These are the concerns for India. And the next, the perilous consequences of automation dependency. So today we are depending on GPS. We are depending on Internet of Things. So more and more we are depending on technology. The human brain is unable to work or function when this technology is not available. So in the case he takes an example, an Air France flight met an accident because auto flight system failed to work. The pilots were trained to fly an aircraft on an auto flight system. When the auto flight system failed to respond as they are not used to run the flight manually, it ended up in a chaos and a huge disaster. That's why author says that testing the human intelligence and upkeeping the human intelligence is essential for us. That is the essence of this article. Finally, thank you very much. Have a great day. All today we have covered Hindu, Indian Express, and Mint. So thank you very much. So as these three newspapers have to be covered, it is taking a little longer, and also for me to prepare the slides and notes etc. it is taking 4 to 5 hours. That's why video is getting delayed. But however, I can find good articles in Indian Express, so I want to cover that newspaper. And also I want to recruit more people to do the videos so that the burden on me will decrease and it can shared among various partners. So we got a great teacher in the name of Geeta ma'am in our Bangalore center, and we're also looking for 2 or 3 more people. Thank you very much. Have a great day.